Welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a video from the B1M. It is called "The Chernobyl Shield is Broken." Here's what that means.
We need to talk about Chernobyl.
There has been a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union.
Добрый вечер, товарищи.
Worst accident in the short history of the world's nuclear power industry.
The Chernobyl nuclear power accident.
На Чернобыльской атомной электростанции произошла авария.
You know, people say it was an accident, and it was, but it was more than that. It was a series of accidents that this had to happen, for this to happen, for this to happen, for this to happen, for that to happen, for kaboom. And it was like that series of things that did happen.
It was the worst nuclear disaster in history, and one that still haunts nuclear power to this day. But it was also...
That is very true. Even to today, some people don't think nuclear power is a safe alternative to anything else, even though it is one of the safest. With all the safety measures in place, nothing ever will happen like Chernobyl again.
kind of fine.
Like, even a decade or so ago, when the tsunami hit Japan and hit their Fukushima reactor, that thing's back online and running. Like, everything's fine now. And that thing almost melted down.
It no longer presented any kind of risk. Thanks to unprecedented international collaboration, this open sore had been bandaged, and a dedicated group of men and women had begun the work of healing Ukraine's terrible wound. And then this happened.
Yep. I remember this video surfacing earlier this year and knew as soon as things were investigated, something was going to need to happen to remedy this, because I bet you it's leaking radiation again.
A drone attack earlier this year blew a hole in the side of this. The multi-billion euro shelter designed to keep the reactor and us safe. So, is Chernobyl okay? And what happens next?
This is the NSC, the New Safe Confinement. It's a vast feat of engineering that entombs the infamous Chernobyl Reactor 4. The result of a monumental €2 billion international collaboration, it was designed to stand the test of time, with an expected lifespan.
Well, as long as Russia didn't send a drone at it. That's the big story, is that it was a Russian attack. I don't know. At the time, it was at a time period where Trump was just getting into office and he's trying to end the war there. And so there was speculation that, Zelensky doesn't want the war to end. He wants to remain in his position of power. So he sent a drone to attack Chernobyl and blame it on Russia. I am less likely to believe that one than that Russia just had a little oopsie.
Of 100 years, it was built to withstand the worst Mother Nature could muster. Earthquakes, lightning strikes, tornadoes. But no one ever thought it would have to survive this. Just after 2 AM on the 14th of February 2025, a Russian Dran-2 drone struck the northwest corner of the NSC.
Horror, to be honest. I was gobsmacked.
This is Simon Evans, head of the International Chernobyl Cooperation Account at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. He's dedicated the past few decades to safeguarding the future of Chernobyl and coordinated efforts to pay for the construction of the NSC.
Good man.
It caused a hole of around 15 square meters on the external and internal cladding to the new safe confinement on the northern side of it.
As fire crews raced to douse the flames, it soon became clear that the damage went much further than the impact site. Thermal imaging footage revealed the fire had begun to spread inside the roof's cladding. Firefighters drilled holes above the smouldering skin in an attempt to douse the fire, but their efforts were thwarted by the bitter Ukrainian winter. With air temperatures reaching minus 16 degrees Celsius, the water began to freeze before it could trickle down and quench the blaze.
Yeah, that's the worst case scenario. This thing happens in the middle of the winter, and now you can't even put out the fire that's spreading, and it's just like your water's freezing, and horrible.
One fireman nearly died when his rope was cut by a shard of twisted metal.
That's another thing you don't even think of, is where your rope is hanging from.
It had taken 7 fire hoses spraying water non-stop for 17 days for it to be brought under control. On March the 7th, the fire was finally declared over.
I didn't even realize that all happened, that the fire burned that long. I only knew of a missile hit and that a fire was started but put out. I didn't realize it was that long before it was put out. Huh.
As well as an enormous blast hole in the roof, around 200 square metres of cladding, most of the northern side of the arch, had been destroyed. For Chernobyl, the new safe confinement really was as good as it was ever going to get. As impressive as the physical structure was, it was also so much more than that. It was a solution to an impossibly complex problem, one that let workers begin the long, hard work of demolishing and clearing the site of the crippled reactor. But in the early hours of that February morning, that plan, and the hope that came with it, was being reduced to ash.
Now, to properly understand just how catastrophic this attack was, you've first got to understand just how dangerous Reactor 4 is in the first place.
The explosion at Chernobyl, it wasn't a nuclear explosion in the sense that a nuclear bomb explodes. It was a kind of runaway nuclear reaction. My name's Jim Smith. I'm Professor of Environmental Science at Portsmouth University, and I've been studying the Chernobyl accident since 1990.
In the early hours of the 26th of April 1986, a routine safety test in
had
Reactor
35
4
years
caused
studying
a
it.
runaway chain reaction.
And yeah,
The heat
Reactor
from this
4
caused a build-up of hydrogen gas, resulting in a huge explosion that exposed the reactor core.
But what we've got to remember is that lots and lots of radioactive elements were emitted by the accident, what we call fission products. So we're not so worried about the uranium that formed the reactor and formed the nuclear fuel. We're worried about the things that uranium splits into when it undergoes radioactive fission in a nuclear reactor.
Those
that
fission
was just
products
thrown
were
into
forced
the
out of
atmosphere.
The safety of the reactor core to the surrounding structure and up into the atmosphere in the form of a deadly cloud of dust and gas. Over the next 10 days, that cloud floated over the surrounding area, and gradually those particles fell to Earth.
There's kind of hot spots close to the plant, and particularly there's what we call the Red Forest. So the Chernobyl accident happened in spring, and it was given that name because the trees died in an area of about sort of 10 square kilometres of forest because of the intense radiation.
And it could be hundreds of years before it's completely safe.
But here's the thing, the cloud that caused all this carried just 5% of the nuclear waste from Reactor 4. In other words, the other 95% is still inside, waiting to get out.
Yeah.
Back in 1986, after the fires from the explosion were extinguished, attention quickly turned to making sure the rest of Reactor 4's deadly inventory stayed exactly where it was. To do that, they built this, the shelter object, also known as the sarcophagus.
Sarcophagus that wasn't enough.
Construction began in June 1986, just 2 months after the accident. The northern side of the reactor was covered in wreckage. Rather than clear it, work began on encasing it inside a colossal stepped wall. Steel slabs created a mould, and contaminated vehicles and crane sections were loaded as infill before vast quantities of concrete was poured in. 3 tiers were constructed to encase this side of the reactor. Over on the south side, an enormous steel support, the Mammoth beam, was laid. On top of this, L-shaped steel slabs, known as hockey sticks, were laid to enclose the structure. The roof was created by installing a raft of steel pipes over hastily installed supports.
Sorry, I'm not talking. This is just interesting and kind of straightforward.
After 206 days of frantic construction, the sarcophagus was complete.
It was a truly heroic structure built under enormous pressure, but it was far from ideal, and understandably, the circumstances of its construction inevitably led to some major compromises.
Well, of course, they rushed to get it done as quick as they could.
In 1996, just 10 years after it was constructed, serious warnings began to emerge about its structural stability. Unless it was reinforced, the sarcophagus could collapse within a matter of years, sending yet another, even bigger plume of radioactive dust into the atmosphere. For the authorities tasked with decommissioning the site, the CHNPP, this would have turned a bad dream into a...
Yeah, right there. If that had done it, then that would have just ended everything about, the abilities of the Russian Empire, the former Soviet Union at that time, because in 96, the wall had already come down. So the Soviet Union had fallen at that point, and it was now all the countries had dispersed out, they'd been their own things.
Total nightmare. Not only would they have to figure out how to safely demolish this, the mangled wreck of the reactor, they'd first have to figure out how to remove thousands of tons of highly radioactive splintered steel and concrete.
A new solution was needed, so in 2001, after years of fundraising from agencies right around the world, design work began on the new safe confinement.
The dome.
And so the new safe confinement was designed to do two things. One was to prevent, in the case of some sort of collapse of the sarcophagus, prevent release of radioactive dust to the environment. And then secondly, to kind of provide a structure that could be used to put cranes inside to start dismantling the sarcophagus and take the nuclear fuel out of the site.
The plan was to create a huge hangar which would hermetically seal Reactor 4 and the sarcophagus. 160 metres long, 260 metres wide and 108 metres high, this enormous structure could have swallowed up the Colosseum. The huge size of the NSC wasn't necessary just to cover Reactor 4. Crucially, it also provided the space needed to survey and deconstruct this fantastically complicated wreck.
Just such an incredible piece of work that they had to go do so quickly to defend the world, essentially. Imagine life today if all the radiation and radioactive material had just been allowed to seep out and seep out and seep out forever. And, some of us might not be alive today. It definitely might have killed some of the people who are alive. And I think anybody who's gave their life to build this thing, to work here at the time, and all the liquidators who went in to make sure the reactors were shut off and not emitting more and more and more and more and more. And that they could, and that they could safely shut down the other reactors so that it wouldn't cause a chain reaction. Kaboom! Reactor 4, 3, 2, 1. And then, you've got a massive nuclear problem on your hands.
But the sheer size created problems of
an even more massive
its own. Because of the risk of radiation, constructing the NSC directly over the reactor was strictly off the cards. Instead, it would have to be built on tracks 150 metres away and then slid into place. But even with a vast, specially constructed works area, there simply wasn't enough room to build the arch in one piece. The solution engineers came up with was to build the structure in two halves. Once the first half was completed, it'd be slid over to one side to make way for the second. The first section would then be slid back, and the two halves welded together. In 2010, construction began. Again, because of the enormity of the structure, it was impossible to build it from the ground up. Instead, it would have to be put together from the top down. The
Then
centre of the
raised
arch
with
was
cranes,
constructed
yeah.
first, close to ground level, before being hoisted up by strand jacks. These work by feeding a bundle of steel wires through a set of 2 clamps. The top clamp grips the
Well, that's
cables
cool.
and hoists them upwards. The bottom
Then it just
secures the
uses
bundle,
tension?
allowing the top clamp to drop down and repeat the process. The 2 side segments were pulled into place as the centre was raised up. Here you can see the internal structure of the roof. It consists of a series of 1 metre wide steel pipes running horizontally across the structure. These are held in place by a lattice of steel beams bolted with pre-tensioned bolts.
Yeah,
It creates a
as long as
10 metre
that's
wide
everything
void
is
between
perfect.
the upper and lower
Welding
sections
would
of the
have
roof,
obviously been
known
stronger,
as the
but
annular space. The
Oh,
annular
well.
space contains systems which, once operational, regulated humidity and maintained a band of high-pressure air. The lack of moisture preserved the steelwork, while the pressurised atmosphere meant that if there were any small punctures in the ceiling, air would flow from the roof into the space below, preventing any leaks. When the drone strike hit, it blew a hole through the upper and lower parts of the roof,
Yeah, I
resulting
figured that
in a
happened.
total loss of air pressure. Now, if any dust is created by anything collapsing, there's nothing
It
to
just
stop it
escapes.
from escaping through this hole. The roof itself is composed of a sophisticated layering of materials. The inner roof is lined with beveled stainless steel panels designed to reflect gamma rays back towards the reactor. The outer roof, meanwhile, is as smooth as possible to help rain and snow to slide off. Beneath
You know
the
what?
surface of this layer
yeah, you wouldn't want snow to build up on top and weigh the lid in and just cave in.
is a combination of
That would be
different
even
types
more
of insulation
disastrous.
and a synthetic rubber membrane. These protected the NSC from rain and extreme weather. In tests, it was shown that if lightning struck, only a few millimetres of thermal insulation would be damaged, without lighting the membrane further down. But while they were perfectly designed for everything nature could throw at it, they conspired to do extensive damage following the attack. As the explosion blew open the roof,
Yeah, they built it to stand up to nature, but they didn't build it to stand up to man.
the cladding was exposed to fire.
Probably because they didn't think any man would be stupid enough to damage it and do something like this.
Igniting the membrane inside. This then began smouldering, causing the most extensive damage. The thermal insulation also did its part to hamper the efforts of firefighters. It hid the extent of the smouldering from thermal imaging cameras. In April 2016, construction on the NSC was complete, and all that remained was to slide it into place. The whole 36,000-ton structure sat on a series of skid shoes, individual jacks that pushed the arch along Teflon rails.
Same way they
It was
built
the
the thing
largest
upward.
moving land-based object ever built.
100%. I don't even think anything will ever top this as the largest largest moving land object. I mean, this is bigger than aircraft carriers.
Travelling at a pace of 10 metres an hour, it took 15 days for the structure to reach its final position.
To be honest, I felt a little bit emotional at the time. I was a bit surprised at myself because it's just a big lump of steel, and we've been, dealing with it for many, many years.
And to my left, you can see the new safe confinement, which encloses the destroyed reactor unit 4. And we're at the place where the confinement interacts with the old facilities. And we obviously have to ensure that there's a hermetic seal between the two. And this is the work that you can see which is ongoing here. And this membrane is an example of a membrane which goes all around the entire circumference of the new safe confinement with the destroyed sarcophagus. Overall, we have about 2 kilometres of membrane.
In November 2016, the move was complete, but construction and testing continued for the next 3 years.
When it was finally done, it was a great moment of celebration, and it was a sense of...
So they finished it in 2016, had it in place a little bit after it was done, and then they were done testing on it about 3 years later in 2019. And then in 2025, fucking someone lobbed a drone at it and blew a hole in
sort
it.
of healing a scar that had blighted the region for many decades.
Finally, in July 2019, a ceremony marked the official handing over of the facility to the Ukrainian authorities, and the new safe confinement began its century-long watch over the destroyed reactor. But that vigil would last barely 6 years before coming to a devastating end.
Such a crazy thing for them to have had happen to this place. Definitely should have been more protected, I think, anything, but, I'm also in the same boat that Ukrainians probably didn't think Russia would be so stupid as to make a move like this. This doesn't just put Ukrainians and people who live near this at risk, it puts the whole world at risk.
But as dramatic as the attack was, it's far from the only threat that's brought Chernobyl's future into doubt.
That's right. I almost forgot about this one too. When Russia first invaded, the Russian tanks rolled through the area around it, and their treads and the wheels of all their vehicles were kicking up radioactive dust, and it was making their own soldiers sick.
The power plant was captured by Russian troops on day one of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022.
This morning, the Chernobyl nuclear site in Ukraine is now under the control of Russian troops.
As military vehicles drove off-road through the exclusion zone, clouds of radioactive dust were sent into the atmosphere.
Yep.
Incredibly, soldiers even dug trenches while taking up defensive positions in the Red Forest. According to the Ukrainian authorities,
I don't know why they would
soldiers were later treated at a specialist radiation hospital in Belarus,
suits.
with one reported to have died of acute radiation sickness.
Yeah, that tracks.
Russian forces withdrew a month later, but their presence and the effects of the invasion never left.
Yeah, the invasion that's still going on today. I really hope that the war in Ukraine does come to an end, and at this point, I think that the end should be the West and America coming in, either giving Ukraine all the weapons or just joining in outright, forcing Russia out, and then forcing Russia to pay some reparations and whatnot to, repair Ukraine for Ukrainians. Not repair Ukraine to be a Russian puppet territory.
The war has destroyed not just the physical fabric of the site, but the network of expertise needed to decommission a vastly complicated nuclear facility.
There's also a human capital issue, which I think is one of the real understated problems, in that so many of the experts and people we work very closely with are simply no longer there anymore. And it requires expertise, It requires individuals, and rebuilding that knowledge base is going to take a huge amount of time as well.
Yeah, without the knowledge and the experts, the people who know how to safely take care of all this, it either all just has to sit there making the problem worse and worse over time, or they have to invest a ton of money bringing in experts, or invest a lot of time training new experts. It's a lose-lose-lose situation all around.
Life has become even more difficult for those left working at the plant. After the evacuation of Pripyat, workers were housed in a newly built city 50 kilometers to the east. But since the start of the invasion, that suddenly feels much further away.
They used to be able to get to the site within about an hour on a dedicated train line. That train line went through Belarus. It's now no longer operational. Workers have a 5.5 hour, 6 hour transfer to site.
As if that weren't bad enough,
awful.
An alternative bridge nearby was also destroyed, sabotaging shorter routes to the plants.
So just tremendously different.
Why does Russia just hate the entire world? Unless it's all Russia. What is it with the rhetoric of communism that just makes them so crazy as to want to have every bit of land theirs? It's like, as an American, I'm very happy with a Canadian friend on our northern border and our Mexican friends to the south. Both of them we have good trade relationships with. Some used to be better, but, those were abusive to the U.S., so we fared them up. But, I don't think the United States, like Russia does, and I don't think we need to move up and take over our northern neighbor or anything like that. Like, if voluntarily they all wanted to come join us, I'm sure the U.S. would vote to have them join.
Difficult things have incurred that maybe we don't think about.
But we don't need to do it through armed occupation.
Complex nuclear engineering you're going to have to deal with, but it's essential for stable site operations that are simply not there at the moment.
We spoke to quite a few people at CHNPP for this video, and they all said the biggest challenge they face is funding. After the completion of the NSC, Ukraine stepped up to pay for the decommissioning of the whole site itself. But now, with a war to pay for, the funds available have dropped off a cliff.
It's a shame that the US couldn't have sent any of the funds that we sent to the war to decommissioning Chernobyl. That's a site that really needs to get cleaned up, removed, and then eventually one day people can live there again in probably like 5,000 years.
So what of the new safe confinement? Well, it's important to point out that there's no danger in its current state, but that would all change pretty quickly if the sarcophagus, which is now in a very precarious position, were to...
Yeah, and with the missile, or with the drone hitting the facility, I'm sure the sarcophagus got a little rattled.
To collapse.
In the short term, authorities are looking to patch the hole created by the drone and the 300 other holes drilled by fire crews. But that's really more of a quick fix than a permanent solution. In the long run, no one really knows what to do.
How you start to repair the longer term functionality of the arch is still not yet known, but we do have some work underway to come up with engineering solutions. I think it's unlikely that we will be able to simply replicate the original design and repair it. We're going to have to look at
replicating the design
which might include a reduction in
that would take another 20 years,
which was previously 100
by
years.
Then, replicating an arch, rebuilding another one, and putting a new one in place, that would take so long that the sarcophagus might collapse, spewing radiation all over, and thus killing all the workers who are building the new dome. And not to mention the cost of building a new one with every country, worldwide inflation nowadays is so much higher that, and they're in the middle of a war-torn country of Ukraine.
One initial suggestion was to detach the affected half of the shelter and slide it back to the construction area for repairs. But
I don't think they should do that. I think they need to leave it over in case the sarcophagus collapses, so that at least some of the radiation will get caught. Yeah, some will be spewing out that hole, but the majority will at least get caught and thrown back down, and it'll be lessened.
Looking into it, the consortium that built the NSC ruled that out as impossible.
And it's probably sealed to the rest of the facility too.
If there's anything positive to come out of this, it's that despite all the tragedy that's happened at the Chernobyl site, huge progress has been made by different countries coming together to work on a solution. And as grim as things are, that sense of collaboration hasn't been dimmed. The EBRD, which was so instrumental to find the funds to build the NSC, is already hard at work trying to find the money to cover its repairs. And in the face of indescribable hardship, the team at CHNPP have lost none of their determination to do whatever it takes to fix this mess.
Well, that's good, at least. That they haven't lost any determination and that they're going to continue to try. Because that'll be the worst day ever, is the day they choose to give up and say that's unfixable. We can't stop it.
I think we have causes for hope. I mean, if you look at the circumstances that Ukraine is facing and the work that they have already managed to put in respect to keeping Chernobyl safe and secure under unbelievably difficult circumstances, that's a tremendously inspirational. But I also think that the international community has stood up and recognised that this is not something that they are prepared to leave Ukraine to suffer and deal with by themselves.
Don't forget that we're raising awareness of construction's mental health crisis and supporting charities in this space through our Get Construction Talking initiative. You can learn more and find links to support over at getconstructiontalking.org. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you subscribe to the B1M.
Yeah, that was a great video. Definitely subscribe to his channel. I'm subscribing. That was worth it. May have to come back and react to another video in the future. He did a great job. But anywho, toss a like here, toss a like there. Go watch the video, subscribe to me, subscribe to him, and have a great day.